We are following breaking news from Plymouth, Massachusetts, where closing arguments are next to come in the murder trial of Lindsay Clancy. Today, the defense rested after hearing from a forensic psychiatrist. Testimony is set to resume this hour, with the prosecution speaking to rebuttal witnesses. Clancy, you may remember, has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, but admits to killing her children. Prosecutors say Lindsay Clancy strangled her children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan, on January 24th, 2023, after sending her then-husband Patrick out for some errands. She then jumped out of the home's second-story window, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. The prosecution rested its case Monday morning, and the defense then called several witnesses this week, including Clancy's mother, sister, and ex-mother-in-law. The defense argues Clancy was suffering from postpartum psychosis at the time and should not be held criminally responsible for the deaths.
It's actually not frequent to have a postpartum psychosis 8 months after a birth, but it does occasionally occur. And so what I can say is whether it is the classic postpartum psychosis or not, with the postpartum onset and frank psychosis on the day of the killing, I would label that a postpartum psychosis, in the sense that it was a postpartum onset and she was clearly psychotic on that day.
Well, the prosecution is now questioning its first rebuttal witness, another forensic psychiatrist. He concluded that Clancy probably suffered from a major depressive episode and anxiety, but he said there was no evidence that she was ever bipolar, in a manic state like the defense has argued.
I can appreciate that she felt side effects and a degree of change from the medications that she took. So I don't know that that feeling or that belief is necessarily psychotic.
CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins us now. Jessica, always so good to talk to you about these types of cases, because you can really understand and help us understand the defense's argument as well as the prosecution's argument. So help us understand the pros and cons of deciding not to have Clancy testify in her defense.
Well, we know that it's always extremely risky to have a defendant take the stand because they are subject to cross-examination. And frankly, oftentimes you see a defendant take the stand only when it's basically a Hail Mary situation where they think that that is the only way that they might be able to win the case. Oftentimes the safer bet, and that's why we generally don't see defendants take the stand in this type of case, or we often don't, this safer bet is not to have somebody testify, and the jury is generally instructed not to hold that against the defendant in this case. Again, I think the defense has made the decision that in this situation, subjecting her to cross-examination, even though she might be able to make the case better than anybody else, that the risks are simply too high. And that's why instead they put these mental health professionals and psychiatrists on the stand to say that she was in fact not able to form the intent necessary, that under the Massachusetts law, that she could not be found guilty of murder.
I want to follow up on that, because what we heard from the defense, that expert, was that it was psychotic on that day. Is that part of the reason that they don't want her to testify? Because her mental state on that day is very different potentially from her mental state in this moment.
Well, I think that's right. When it comes to the legal standard, what we're looking for is that at the moment of the killings, at the moment of the crimes, that she either was not able to appreciate that the conduct was unlawful, or that she was not able to conduct herself within the law. That's a very high burden. So we should be clear that I think there's no question in this case that she was suffering. She was suffering. We have heard from serious mental illnesses. She tried to get help over and over again. The question isn't whether she was depressed or even whether she was bipolar. To your excellent question, this is about her state at the time, her state of mind at the time, and whether or not she can be found criminally liable, or if she was in a episode of psychosis, and if she could not conform her behavior within the law and did not understand that her behavior transgressed the law.
Jessica, it wasn't that long ago that people didn't even understand what postpartum depression was. And this is postpartum psychosis. Still, it's something that is horrific with 3 little lives gone. What do you expect from the prosecution's rebuttal?
So I think the prosecution will say, we understand that she was suffering. Many people suffer and they don't kill their children. I think what we're also going to hear from the prosecution is that she did, in fact, understand what she was doing was wrong. That's why she sent her husband away for that period of time. For the prosecution, they're going to have to accept, again, that there was serious mental illness when it comes to Clancy and what she was suffering from during this period. But they're going to say she still was able to understand right from wrong. And they're going to focus on that planning, getting the husband out of the house. And again, they have their competing experts to say, of course, she was suffering from mental illness, but it didn't cross over. Listen to all these mental health professionals who are saying it did not cross over to psychosis. And you're exactly right, of course, to zero in on that issue.
And the burden of proof in our legal system is always, at least nominally, supposed to be with the prosecution. But we know that that doesn't always necessarily factor into how people hear arguments when it comes to a person's mental health or a crime that involves the taking of 3 young children. So how will the burden of proof go into all of this? And do you think that the prosecution has cleared that hurdle?
So I think we're going to have to see in, the coming hours when it comes to closing arguments, we're going to have to reassess. I think the defense has done a good job of putting on experts to say that, in fact, Clancy was suffering from a type of psychosis. What we heard today was that she thought that she was commanded to kill her children. We also heard testimony that she said after the killings, she said, my children are safe now. And so the defense is trying to make the argument that she thought she was actually doing something to keep her children safe. And that's how disturbed her thinking truly was. In terms of the jury, I mean, you're exactly right, again, to point out this is not just a tragic case, it is deeply emotional. Everybody is going to have a very strong reaction to this case. When it comes to the legal standard, as you pointed out, it's the prosecution's burden to show beyond a reasonable doubt that she understood what she was doing, that she can be found criminally liable because she was, in fact, able to comport herself within the law. She did, in fact, understand that what she was doing was wrong. That's a high threshold, as it is in all criminal cases.
For some people, this one is going to seem like such a clear one. For others, this is going to be a very hard one. You mentioned hours. When do you expect closing arguments? And then how long do you think it'll take the jury to deliberate and we'll get an actual verdict?
So I think closing is going to happen. We know that there's rebuttal and then there is going to be closing. I think we're talking about this afternoon and then probably spilling into Monday, if not Tuesday. And then you ask the question that is so hard for people like me to answer, which is how long is this going to take the jury? Let's remember that the jury has not been allowed to go back into a room and talk to each other. They may go back into that room and realize that they're all on the same page or they're all in completely different spaces. And that will really determine whether or not this is a quick verdict or not. We know that the conventional wisdom is that the faster you get the verdict, the better it is for the prosecution.
All right, Jessica Levinson, thank you for watching and for making all of it make that much more sense to us. Appreciate you.